Hi everyone, it's me, Sailor Mars, Sailor Red World Ray here, and today everyone asks me, they go, why do you always have to get in fights with Serena? Well, because Serena is irksome. When I first met Serena, I didn't think she had the good skills in her to be a leader. So by seeing her being a klutz and a ditz and a sob baby, I said there's no way she can be a leader. So I spent most of the first following believing that she was not grown up enough to be the leader. So that's where the fighting came from, you know? And again, I always have anger binds, but I never broke anything. It's more of me yelling or hollering or shouting at Serena, which you would think, which a lot of folks like think it's a cool thing. And a lot of folks are like, oh, well, your forgiveness was that you didn't think she was a good enough leader, so that's why you yelled at her. And it's like, yeah. And even after I learned that she was the moon elderling, we still had our back and forth fights, but not as much as it was. A lot of folks are going to say, oh, well, mostly they'll say, oh, it happened a lot during the first following. Oh, it happened sometimes during the 2-whiff following, 3-whiff following, and the 4th following. You know? And other folks are going to say, oh, well, you weren't like that in PGSM, the live Farseer show, or in the books or anything like that. And yes, that's true. You know? But Toei took freedoms. And Deke, well, they kept that in. And the true grounds, that's why I fought her. That's why I always yelled or hollered or shouted at her. Because in my mind, in the beginning, I didn't think she was a good enough leader. You know, because I looked at, I saw her be the sob baby, the klutz, the ditz, whatever. And I was like, well, she can't be a good enough leader. So that was my forgiveness for most of the first following. What my forgiveness was for the 2-whiff following, 3-diff following, the 4 followings, as well as the films, was her being irksome. Yeah, kid you not. That's another ground why I always got pissed off at her. Because either she behaved like she didn't take anything earnest, or she was being irksome. And I got a low dealing with folks being irksome. And if you think it was only Serena I was yelling at, well, sometimes I yelled at Chad. Other times, believe it or not, I yelled at Mina, but not as much as I yelled at Serena. And as far as when Ernest came on the team, and still on the team as Sailor Earth, I got someone new for me to get irked and get angered at. But that's the truth to why I always yelled, or hollered, or shouted at Serena. Yeah, right there. I know that's not a good enough ground, sake or why, but that's why I did it for most of the first following. Because I was like, I didn't think she could be a good enough leader. But later on, I said that I was wrong about that. And a lot of folks would say, well, doesn't that mean that all the hollering, yelling, and shouting you had with her stopped? No, because she still was irksome. She still didn't take a lot of things earnest. Or at least that's how I took it, which led into more of those yelling, hollering, shouting matches that, happened throughout the rest of Sailor Moon. And the whole thing about sticking the tongue out, well, that came out later on, because in the first days, we didn't do that. That was offshooted in later on, the whole tongue sticking out. So, yeah, that's my grounds why I either yelled, hollered, or shouted, or screamed it at Serena. Hopefully, that's a good enough answer to your asking thing. So, if it's not, well, then it's not. And not really much I can do about that now, can I?